Kia ora, everyone. My name is David Langford. I'm the infrastructure manager for New Plymouth District Council, and I've got my colleague with me, Tyler, who's business development manager for Becca. I'm going to talk to you for maybe the first 40 minutes just around the procurement strategy that New Plymouth District Council's put in place for its infrastructure services, and then I'll hand over to Tyler, who has spent a few months working on one of our projects. And he's going to talk to you about his experience of actually putting the strategy into action. My role as the infrastructure manager, just to give you an idea of what that means, I'm responsible for New Plymouth District's roads, its drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, its rubbish collections, landfills, recycling centre, parks, cemeteries, crematorium, and I think I've got everything. It's a part-time job, but it does keep me a little bit busy. So, look, my presentation is about the importance of client leadership when you're procuring infrastructure services, particularly in the construction sector. There's, I think, historically been quite a long-standing lack of leadership in that space from clients. And just to kick us off, because you thought you were going to sit there and just listen to me, and I'm going to get you involved now, start with a little bit of a thought experiment. I'm going to pretend that I'm me, and I've got a road construction project that I want to tender, and you lovely people in the audience are all my contractors, my supply chain, and you're going to bid for my contract. Typical local authority approach, we'll get a consultant, Tyler from Becca, will write a contract for us, we'll advertise it, put it out to tender, probably lowest price conforming, and can I get any bids from the audience, please? Who would like to tender for my contract? Don't all come at once? This really is a classic local authority procurement process.
Come on, be brave.
Please bid for my contract. Someone. There we go. We've got a bidder down in the corner. Can I get one more at least? Come on. I don't want to have to rerun this procurement exercise. There we go. There's a second begrudging bid there. So, lowest price conforming. I've read your tender documents. And yours is conforming. Sweet. Yours is also conforming. Now, you've won the work. Sorry, I didn't get your name. Viral. Nice to meet you. So yours is the lowest price, conforming bid. Great. Go and do the work. You deliver the project for me, slightly late. Maybe there's some liquidated damages in the contract. We have a little bit of argument about that, and I give in because local authorities are a bit soft like that sometimes. And we part company until the next time. Everyone kind of recognize that as a pretty classic procurement process.
Awesome.
Falling down a hole. Yep. Now let's repeat that experiment, but this time I'm recruiting someone to join my team. I employ about 180 people. Got a vacancy for a project manager. I write a job advert, put it out on our website, maybe I get Seek or somebody else like that to advertise it for me, and we get some applicants. So who would like to come and work for New Plymouth District Council? I'm a nice guy, I'm a good boss. Yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Already, it's so much easier. So much easier. Now, I've read your CVs. I'm sorry, but your CV isn't conforming. Neither is yours, but Cole, yeah, yours is okay. Who else volunteered? There was 6. And you don't count.
Conflict of interest.
Oh, there we go. Andrew. So look, I've read your CVs. You've both got conforming CVs. Now, I'm not going to bother with an interview process. Who's willing to work for me for the lowest salary? No? Oh, why not? You know, I'm a local authority. We're good payers. Just like in our procurement, we always pay. That's why contractors work for us. We always pay wage. Come on. So look, simple change of context from procuring a team of people to work on a project to deliver a roading improvement scheme, and then procuring a person to come and join my team to actually work directly for me. In one context, what we did is perfectly acceptable. It's the classic norm. The other context, you all looked at me as if I'd lost it, because you simply wouldn't show that lack of leadership when you're recruiting for people. But for some reason, we do it every single day when we procure. So this is why I've deliberately talked about supply chain leadership rather than supply chain management. Management is what you do when things go wrong. It's how you guide process to an endpoint. Leadership is about how you inspire and motivate people, and you get people to want to do what you want them to do. So what is a supply chain leader? Well, first of all, start with what a supply chain leader isn't. A supply chain leader is not a transactional person. They don't use contracts and management to induce performance out of people. We use leadership to inspire and motivate people. We use leadership to coach people, to help them improve and grow. We use leadership to get people to share our vision and share our values so that we can achieve outcomes that go beyond our own self-interests. And in a supply chain where you've got lots of those self-interests, because everyone's got their profit and everyone's got their targets to meet, transcending those self-interests is incredibly important. But it's incredibly challenging, as no doubt you can probably guess. Just like it is when you're dealing with the people that work in your organizations. We all have our own individual needs and desires that need to be met before we can actually move past those and start focusing on the bigger picture. And that bigger picture invariably revolves around our customers, which are our rate-paying community. And that's one of the fundamental mind shifts that we've tried to make at New Plymouth District Council is we no longer think of ourselves as the client. The client's the customer. And that role is reserved exclusively for our rate-paying community. We are now the first link in our supply chain that delivers the services for our community. And being the first link comes with the responsibility of being the leader of our supply chain, to create the vision, to motivate, to inspire, so that our supply chain all pulls together towards a common goal and delivering services for our community to the highest possible standard for the best value for money. So where did we start in actually creating that vision, that common goal? It actually started from our mayor. He's in his first term at the moment, and he came in on a platform of building a lifestyle capital, which for me as an engineer, love building stuff. So really quite got me going right from the get-go. But he underpinned it with this little strapline of people, place, prosperity, putting people first, supporting a prosperous community, and protecting our place, which really good vision for the community. Got quite a lot of people engaged, and he swept in, never even been a councillor before, first time mayor, straight in at the top. So a good result for him. But we looked at the vision, particularly that people, place, prosperity, and I took a little bit of artistic license and said, well, people, social, place is environment, and prosperity is economic. So you've got the three bottom lines of sustainable procurement there. So we incorporated that into our procurement strategy and said, our mayor has given us a mandate for sustainable procurement through people, place, prosperity, social, environmental, and economic outcomes. And then from there, we redefined what we saw as value for money. Previously, the New Plymouth District Council was very much your classic lowest price conforming, cheapest price wins pretty much every bid. Even where we attempted to do weighted attributes, the attributes were written so poorly that all of the contractors scored within a couple of percentage of each other, so it became de facto lowest price anyway, because there was no daylight between any of the bids. So we recast our definition of value for money, and we said it was the best possible combination of the total cost of ownership, quality, and then sustainability. Quality is being fit for purpose and delivering what our community expects of it. Lowest total cost of ownership is obviously the whole of life cost, not just the upfront capital, but its maintenance and disposal at the end of its asset life cycle. And then finally, sustainability is actually building in some of that people, place, prosperity into what we achieve whilst we're delivering the services. And that's really where I'm going to focus today, is about how we've put some of that people, place, prosperity into some of our recent procurements. So first of all, just a little bit of context for the construction industry, because I know some of you will probably from other sectors. Lowest price conforming paradox. I deliberately call it a paradox because when all the dust settles and you finish your project, invariably you haven't paid the lowest price, and usually what you've built isn't conforming with the original design. So you never get what you ask for. So in the construction industry, we've got a real problem, and it's actually an international one, with this lowest price conforming spiral to the bottom. All of our suppliers, they're chasing turnover to sustain their cash flow. And then that's backed up with some really short-term planning horizons, very hand-to-mouth. Where's the next project coming from? Just to keep our guys busy and working. As a result, There's usually quite low profit margins. I think typical at the moment in New Zealand is about 3%. Is a good result. And as a result, the money simply isn't there to invest in people, in training, in growing the capability in the next generation of workers. There's a lot of subcontracting, again, to the lowest price subcontractors. Usually that comes with an increased risk profile because they are cheap for a reason. And then there's lots of poor quality control, which results in a lot of rework, a lot of defects that mean risk is realized and that erodes the profit margins even further. And a lot of the big contractors get stuck in this cycle of they bid for a job at a really, really thin profit margin. It goes wrong. They take on some debt to fund the loss that they've made that year. And then because they've got a debt to service, they have to chase the next project even harder, which means they cut the margins closer to the bone, and round and round and round it goes. And that's what nearly brought Fletcher down. It's what destroyed Carillion in the UK. Carillion, I think, employed somewhere like 45,000 people. They went home on Friday. When they came back into work on Monday, Carillion didn't exist because it went into compulsory liquidation over the weekend because the banks refused to give it any more debt to sustain the losses that it was making. And that was as a result of two projects. I think it was a roading project in Manchester and a hospital in Scotland. And that was all it took. 45,000 people out of work over the weekend. So not a great people outcome. So yeah, cash flow is king. Tendering costs can sometimes make up as much as 20% of a total project's cost with all of the paperwork that goes with it. Debt funding losses, and there's a really high churn in the construction sector here in New Zealand. We're averaging about 20% over the last 10 years, which is really, really high. And there's a little bit more context here. So the OECD regularly points at New Zealand and says you've got a productivity problem. You're down at the bottom of all of the OECD nations. Last time I looked, we were lagging about 30% behind Australia at a national level, and then our construction sector lags kind of another 30% behind the national. So of all the sectors in New Zealand, we're kind of the worst of the worst in terms of our productivity. And there's a lot we can do to change that, which I'll talk about shortly. So, how many of you would recognize some of these when it comes to roadworkers? This is a quick Google of roadworker memes, and these are some of the more pleasant ones. So, I wonder. There's me. That's me. That's my roading manager, my quality control manager, my project manager, and a couple other guys, and we're all standing around watching the guy on the shovel actually dig a hole. This is how the public see the construction sector in New Zealand. This is why we struggle to recruit good quality talent, because people think of this. Diggers, noughts and crosses. I think that's Photoshopped. I hope it is. So one of the fundamental challenges we're trying to address is how do we change this public perception? Because if we can only attract these kind of people because all of the good people want to be doctors or lawyers or architects or go and work in a trade, be a nurse, be whatever, we're the last on their little list of careers I want. I want to go and be the, excuse my French, the dickhead on the stop-go paddle, then so you might have to bleep that out. So how do we attract good quality talent? And look, it's flowing through into our results. This is Department of Building and Housing survey a few years ago. They surveyed $400 million worth of construction work, and 69% of it had defects at the time of handover to the client. That's an appalling rate of quality control. No other sector would get away with that, I don't think. And then when you look at the cause, design issues, workmanship issues, setting out issues on site, almost 95% of the reasons behind the defects can be traced back to some kind of skills and capability issue. Actual material faults, I think that's supposed to say 4% of that. Really, really small that you can attribute to not being skills related. And when you look at some of the census data, I think Constructing Excellence have done a bit of a deep dive into this. 81% of the guys on site producing this work have got no vocational qualifications in what they're doing for a living. 80% of construction managers don't have a tertiary qualification in a relevant field. And then it gets, unfortunately, it gets worse. It's run out of battery.
Oh, did you? What? No, you're there.
If you look at the literacy and numeracy rates within the construction sector, about half of our people struggle to read and write at a decent level. And we produce a huge amount of paperwork. Construction drawings that people have to read so they can build the right things in the right place. We produce standard operating procedures, risk assessments, hazard IDs, all these things that we give to our people and say, hey, read this, it'll keep you safe. Read this, material safety data sheet so you know what to do if you get the chemicals in your eye. But half of our guys can't read very well. So there's immediately a connection between the basic competency of some of our people and our poor health and safety track record, because we're communicating ineffectively to the people who work for us. And then a little bit more somber news. Very recently, the construction sector overtook farming to have the highest rate of suicides. So 6.9% of New Zealanders who commit suicide work in the construction sector. And brands have just done a little bit of early research into what might be driving that. And the early research is citing things like a very toxic macho culture, that kind of take a concrete pill and harden up kind of attitude. The boom-bust cycle creates a huge amount of stress as companies grow very rapidly and get out of their depth during booms, and then people lose their jobs during busts. The undervalued career paths were also heavily cited by participants in that research. People feeling like they're undervalued, paid minimum wage, and don't have a rewarding career. So all of those things are contributing towards this. And then, just to finish it off, a little bit of good news. Osroads did a study in 2018 looking at the workforce and did some churn modeling, and they're predicting that based on our current trend, how quickly we're recruiting new talent into the industry, the road and construction workforce will shrink by about 25 to 30% over the next 10 years as more people retire than join the sector. So the workforce we've got has got pretty low skill, low capability. The prediction for demand is going up, but at the same time, our capacity, the number of people we've got working for us is going to go down quite significantly. So we're not short of problems, which is a great thing because from my point of view, it means that we don't have to do very much to actually start making some kind of positive impact because we're starting from such a low baseline. So supply chain leadership, how can that help us address some of these problems? And as you can see from the strap line there, it's about applying a little bit of emotional intelligence to how we procure and how we do business. As an engineer, spent the first 10 years of my career being told by my managers that I had the emotional intelligence of a brick because we wore check shirts and we love spreadsheets because that's what engineers do. So this is something I've had to learn, I will admit. It's not something that comes naturally to me as my default personality setting. So emotional intelligence, how many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy? Most of you in the room, I imagine, yeah. So I'll skim through this pretty quickly. Your physiological needs, food, water, sleep, shelter, the basics to keep you safe. Then it's personal security, health, well-being, social, your friendships, your family, a bit of intimacy, your self-esteem, recognition, some personal status, and the feeling of self-worth. And then finally, self-actualization, that seeking happiness, feeling like you're actually using the talents you've got to achieve something. And the theory being that you can't get to the top until you've satisfied all the needs of life, and you have to progressively work up that hierarchy. Now, how many of you have thought about that hierarchy in a corporate context? So one of the things we've done is try to translate that. So physiological needs now become you're a corporate entity, you've got to have a product to sell to be in business. You've got to be able to actually transact with your customers. You've got to have some customers. Until you've got those things in place, you can't move up to the next level, which then becomes your safety needs. Your customers need to be profitable customers, because if they're not, you're in trouble as a business. Social needs become your brand recognition, your customer satisfaction, those kind of things. Self-esteem, maybe that's professional recognition, industry leadership. What else have we got up on there? Preferred supplier status with your profitable customers. Once you've got those things in place, then you're into the space of corporate social responsibility, giving back to the community, thought leadership, ethical trading, those things. You can't be doing ethical trading if you are losing money because your customers aren't profitable. So I know the theory doesn't always hold out in reality, but you can see there that there's a framework to help you take your suppliers on a journey, to help look after their needs and recognize maybe where they are on that hierarchy and correlate that to their performance on some of your contracts. We also looked at things like the Tuckman's theory of team formation, forming, storming, norming, and performing. Bringing groups of people together, particularly on a big roading contract. I've got 14 roading engineers in my roading team, and then our contractor has, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 30 staff across a whole heap of disciplines, from bridge construction, road resealing, all sorts of different things. We write a contract, we tender it, we throw those people into a room together and say, deliver this, millions of dollars of work, and do it performing from day one right the way through to the end of the contract. Go. You're set up for success. And the reality isn't, because they'll probably spend the first year of the contract forming, just getting to know each other, making those connections and those personal relationships between team members. And then once they've got the first year under the belt and they go, we managed to mobilize the contract and at least deliver the service, then the commercial tension will come in. We didn't quite make as much money as we thought we should have. You didn't complete the program as quickly as you should have. And that tension starts and you get into the storming. And once that subsides, you're into the norming stage. At that point, you're in the back end of year 2, possibly year 3 of the contract. And traditionally, a lot of local authorities and the NZTA will tender their contracts on a 3-year term. You haven't even got to performing yet. And we're already saying contract's possibly coming to an end, but you've got the opportunity of a 2-year extension if your performance is good enough. And then after that, maybe another 2-year extension. This is pretty classic for road contracts across most local authorities and across the NZTA. And if you think about what's the supplier thinking here? Any thoughts from the audience? No. If you were just getting into that performing stage, and then I said, we're going to review your performance, and in 6 months' time, I'll decide whether we're going to give you the 2-year extension or not. And I'm not going to give you any hints as to whether you will or won't get it. I'm going to leave you wondering. Where are you on this hierarchy?
You're at the bottom. Because you're waiting for you need the next job to fund the cash flow.
Yeah. You're still wondering whether in 6 months' time you're going to have a customer. Never mind whether he's a profitable customer or anywhere else. And wherever you've managed to climb up that hierarchy in those 3 years, your thoughts are immediately back to survival mode. Am I going to have a customer? Am I going to have a contractor? Or am I packing up and laying my guys off in 6 months? What am I doing? Bearing in mind, we hadn't even got to performing yet. So we're designing our contracts deliberately to shoot ourselves in the foot just as we're getting to the point of everything's in place and working properly, and we're turning our attention to continuous improvement and all the really good stuff. We pull the rug out from underneath ourselves. It's awesome. So at New Plymouth District Council, one of the things we did was we applied all of this stuff, all of this thinking, and we said, tell you what, we're going to tender a contract. We're going to go to the national market and get the best possible supplier we can get. Why don't we just give them the full term of the contract, and let's make it a bit longer, 10 years. If we need to protect ourselves from underperformance, then let's build in a KPI mechanism that will allow the contract to shrink if they underperform. That way, we're not completely locked in for 10 years with somebody who isn't delivering what we wanted. If they underperform, but then make things good a couple of years into the contract and get things back where they need to, they can earn that reduction back so they can get back to the full 10 years. Immediately, hopefully you can see that we've removed that rug pulling moment from underneath our collective team, because we're starting from a position of trust. We trust that the contractor is going to deliver for the full 10 years. We're assuming that they're good for what they put in their bid, rather than saying, you've got to earn it, you've got to prove it over the first 3 years to earn it. So if it's yours to win, it's now theirs to lose, which is quite a significant psychological shift, I think. What that also does is it gives us a great platform to achieve some of the people stuff. So our new road maintenance contract is 10 years long. We've bundled about 20 smaller contracts into one big one, because that gives us a nice stable workload that will last 10 years, that will be consistent and flat without peaks and troughs, no boom and bust. We're not having contracts change hands between suppliers every 3 years. Our suppliers can now go out and recruit people knowing that they've got a stable workload for 10 years. On that platform, they can invest in safer equipment. On that platform, they can invest in training and developing their people. They can actually build succession plans in and transfer knowledge between the generations in their workforce. They can actually buy into the vision and values, the people, place, prosperity, the building and lifestyle capital for our community. And not just as a corporate entity get that sense of we're part of the community, but all the people that, because the guys that work on these contracts and girls, they're part of the New Plymouth District Council community. They live in the district, they work for us delivering services for our community. And this allows us a really good platform to actually do right by them and look after them in a way that stops them killing themselves, possibly. So procuring for safe outcomes, some of the things that we've done with the council. So a big stable contract, this contract's worth $155 million over the 10 years. So as far as New Plymouth goes, that's quite big, still small compared to Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland. But for us, this is the biggest single contract we've ever let by a factor of about 10. And it's allowed us to actually drive investment. We've demanded in the contract that our contractors, if they wanted to win this contract, they had to invest in modern new equipment that was going to keep their guys safe. They had to take a different approach to traffic management, the cones on the road, to keep people safe. And there was that really tragic event a few months ago with 3 Higgins workers hit by the truck whilst they were working on the roads. Never want to see that happen on the roads that I'm responsible for, ever. So one of the first things, this is a chip seal operation. So we spray bitumen on the road, and then we reverse trucks up the road, and they sprinkle stone chipping on the road, and it sticks to the bitumen. New road seal. In my kind of 10 to 15 years working in the UK, never seen it done like this. Being hit by moving plant and vehicles is the biggest cause of fatalities, according to WorkSafe, of workers in New Zealand. And we've got a whole bunch of trucks with guys that are working sometimes up to 70 hours a week, so they're a bit tired, working around these trucks. And the risk of somebody getting run over and killed because they accidentally walk into the blind spot of a vehicle is huge. I've seen it happen in the UK. Fortunately, it wasn't a fatality, but the injuries to the individual involved were horrific and life-changing. So we said, we actually want you to invest in modern equipment that will spread that stone chip in forward gear. And the equipment's been around. When I started my career in the, how many years ago, that stuff was common practice all across the UK. But because we've had such short contracts, and this is $1 million equipment, one truck is $800,000 to $1 million to import from Europe. The contractors simply can't finance it. If you went to your CFO and said, I had like $1 million and I've only got 3 years to get a return on that investment, they'll just say no. I know, because I tried when I worked for Downer. I wanted $500,000 for new mowing equipment for an open space contract that we were running. And I had 2 years left on the contract. The CFO said, no, I'd rather spend our money on a new bitumen sprayer. Some more of this old gear because you can get a return on that because all clients are using it. This is the kind of equipment that's commonplace in Europe. It sprays the bitumen and the chip at the same time, and it just drives along the road in forward gear. You don't need a whole bunch of people babysitting the vehicle, making sure it's reversing and not bumping into the curbs and all those kind of things. Hugely safer. We're coming up to the first chip sealing season of the new contract, and we're going to have one of these machines working on it. And almost all of our chip seal in the first year is going to be spread in forward gear. Completely eliminated that risk for the workers, simply because we gave the contractor 10 years to spread the capital investment over and achieve that return. And I'm not paying any more than the old contract. I haven't had to increase my budgets to pay for this. We've just set the, I suppose, dealt a slightly different hand to our contractors that's much more enabling. Another approach that we've changed is how we pay for critical safety controls like traffic management. Traditionally, these things are priced into the unit rates of the square meterage of new road seal, the curb and channel rates. And if the project doesn't go well for the contractor, he takes a double hit because not only is he not achieving his productivity and making money on the rates, he's also having to put the cones and the signs on the road for much longer than he planned and paying more for that as he goes. And the temptation is that contractors underprice traffic management when they're bidding for it because they want to be the cheapest, or it becomes a tempting corner to cut when jobs aren't going so well and they need to manage their costs. So we have taken the approach of removing critical safety controls like traffic management from the pricing altogether. We've got a provisional sum and we pay cost reimbursable for them. So I can sleep easy knowing that no matter how well the job is going or not, traffic management is always in place and it's always been paid for fairly. And it's not a competitive advantage to underprice it, and it's not a tempting corner to cut to save a little bit of money. The question then, and I get it from my elected members, is aren't we just an open checkbook? Can't we get taken advantage of because you're just paying actual cost plus their fee percentage and there's no incentive for the contractor to manage that? Well, actually there is, because they still have to deliver the project to their original program and meet their productivity targets to make money on the actual rates that they submitted for the work. So they are still incentivized to perform. The other side of things, though, is it puts the onus back on me and my team to actually put some effort into upfront planning. And this is, the photograph is a roundabout that we did about 2 years ago. We rebuilt this roundabout and we tendered the project as a traditional contract. And then once we'd awarded the contract, we sat down with the contractor and said, look, we'd like to try something. We want a proof of concept. We want to test an idea. Let's get rid of the stop and go traffic control that you were planning to use, and we'll give you full road closures for the duration of the job so you can have complete access to the site. It'll be safer because you don't have cars driving past the guys on the lollipops, driving past the guys in the cones, and also you've got a bigger work area, so hopefully you can be more productive and you get the job done quicker. We use the tender price as the baseline, and then we monitor their actual performance when they deliver the work. They delivered the project early, quicker than the original program, and they actually delivered the project for 15% less than the tendered value. And when you work out the labor productivity as the value of the project per hour worked, we actually saw a huge increase, 39% increase in the labor productivity on the job, because we had 4 guys originally standing for 9 hours a day doing that. A lot of labor that produced nothing. It just stood and watched whilst other people produced. We eliminated all that non-productive labor and actually put it into building the roundabout. Because the traffic management, once you've got a road closure set up, is pretty passive. The signs sit there on their own. The cones don't take much looking after, occasionally stand them back up again. So we actually made things safer. We reduced the cost of doing the work, and we closed some of our productivity gap by doing so. So it was a really good result, also a great proof of concept, for a small scale project, it was about $380,000 project. So a small trial before we go big with a $150 million contract, and I'm committed for 10 years. One of the other things that we've used our contract for with that big stable 10-year basis is workforce capability. And before we tendered the contract, we spent about 18 months workshopping our ideas with our suppliers and sitting down and confronting some of those statistics around the low skills, the literacy and numeracy, all of those things, and took a good hard look at ourselves as a sector. We had the Downers, the Thornton Hogans, all of those guys in the room, as well as our local tier 2 and 3 subcontractors, Becca, Opus, separate workshops with our consultants. And we said, tell us what our current workforce looks like. And we went through a workshop and we just brainstormed that and we made bullet point notes. And then a couple of months later, we reconvened and said, so if these are all of our problems, what would we look like in, say, 5 years' time if we fixed these problems? What would our perfect ideal workforce be like? And we went through the same process of brainstorming and bullet pointing it. And we came up with this consolidated vision for our supply chain, my own staff included. So from my position right the way down to the guys on the shovel on the ground. And the vision is split up into 3 things. It's about the makeup of our teams, having the right people on the job. And we talked about the age profile that we've got. A lot of aging workers that are nearing retirement, not so much young blood coming in behind it. So we'd have a nice balanced age profile. We'd address the diversity of our workforce because we've got pretty poor gender diversity, cultural diversity. You know, I'm pretty typical. I'm approaching my middle age, not quite there yet. White, male. I'm classic construction. So we thought our perfect workforce would have redressed that balance, and we'd have people that came with a customer-focused mindset. We'd have enough people to supply to meet the demand so that we weren't always lagging behind and running out of capacity. The next part is how we operate as a team. So the way we do things. First thing, we'd apply a lot more leadership than we do at the moment. We'd have good leaders that inspired and motivated the right people that we've just brought into our team. We'd all have aligned values. We'd pick and choose our suppliers based on how their values lined up and reflected our own. We value continuous improvement. We have proactive cycles where we deliberately, annually looked at ourselves and said, you know what, I think we can do better next year. What are we going to do to make that happen, and put action plans in place? And then that aspiration for excellence, always thinking we can do better. We did great today, but tomorrow we're going to do better. And that's not a criticism, that's just our aspiration. We're hungry for it. Change is something that we're starting to welcome. Yesterday was great, tomorrow's going to be better. It's our fundamental mindset, how all of our people get out of bed every morning. Our people are healthy, great work-life balance. We're drug and alcohol free in the workplace. We value knowledge management. So when we change our teams, we actually think about what's it going to do to our institutional memory and knowledge, that history that we've accrued, and making sure we've got systems and processes in place to capture it. And the workforce is engaged. We've addressed the literacy and numeracy gaps, and we've got a high-skilled workforce that produces quality. I'm getting in the hurry up now, so I'm going to blast through this last bit. And we've made delivering this one of the attributes that the contractor had to tender for. So they had to tell us how they were going to deliver this vision over the life of the contract for us. And we made it one of the KPIs for the contract that determines whether they get the full 10 years or whether it shrinks. Because we wanted our key performance indicators to actually be key. A lot of roading contracts, they measure things like whether the contractor fixes a pothole on time as a key performance indicator. Anyone could tell me what happens if a contractor is 10 minutes late fixing a pothole? Nothing. Nothing. There's no strategic outcome. They just, instead of it taking an hour, it takes an hour and 10 minutes. Still gets fixed. Really, actually, at a strategic level, couldn't care very much. But delivering the next generation of workers, so instead of the workforce shrinking by 30%, we actually stay stable, and I can tender the next contract to a new contractor that's got a workforce. That's strategic, that's important, that's worth measuring. So I put the picture of my wastewater treatment plant there because previous KPIs were a little bit poo. You're probably all looking at that going, what's that? It's one of our bioreactors. Turns sewage into fertilizer. Where we're going to next, and I will blast through this real quick because I don't want to steal all the time. That's one contract that probably only represents about 10% of the budget that I spend every year. So we're now looking at how do we put this into practice outside of that contract, particularly for those little projects that only last 6 weeks. How can you deliver a 10-year vision in 6 weeks? Really hard. But as a supply chain leader, we don't need to have that formal contractual relationship to actually work together towards a common goal. Most of my supply chain is pretty stable. They're regulars. They may be in between contracts, but they've had work with me before. They'll have work with me in the future. So we've stepped back and taken it outside of our contracts and said we all co-created that vision of the future workforce. We all buy into it and we're all excited by it. So let's just agree to deliver it. So we came up with this, I stole this from, I think, the US Chamber of Commerce, and we've implemented our own little version locally. And it's about building a 10-year talent pipeline. And it starts with forming a talent pipeline collaboration. So MPDC has invited our suppliers, all of the secondary schools in the district, the Western Institute of Technology, our tertiary institute within the district, to form this partnership where we can actually look at the construction sector workforce. And then as we go, we're now looking at forecasting the demand for skills that we'll need within our workforce. If you take New Plymouth District Council on its own, I've got 180 people that work for me, but there are a whole bunch of diverse skills from water treatment plant operators, people that operate crematoriums, through to zookeepers. So individually, not very many skills, not a lot of that critical mass of skills that you can justify running a training program with a tertiary education provider. But if you put MPDC in the context of our wider supply chain and all of those companies that operate within the district, then between us, we actually have a good critical mass of skills that if we pulled all of our data together and said, actually, we need 20 digger drivers every single year for the next 10 years, we could actually go to places like WIT and say, can you make us a pre-employment training course that produces digger drivers? Because we're going to have jobs waiting for them. And what we're trying to do is fundamentally change the education sector from a push model, where they take students, train them in something, and then push them out to the market and hope they find a job, to a pull model, where industry says, we need these skills, and this is the caliber that we need them at, and this is the number that we need them. Education sector, go and find them, produce them for us, because we've got the demand, and we'll find them employment when you produce them. We've had some great success recently with the power of our collective. We put an application into the Tertiary Education Commission for $100,000 funding so that we can run an adult literacy and numeracy program for our workforces. One of the qualifying requirements was there had to be a minimum of 20 people to run a course. I could muster up 5 from the council. Fort Hogan locally, they could get 5 or 6, down are the same. So individually, no one of us qualified for the funding, but as a collective, we put an application in, and just after Christmas, we got a letter back from the TEC saying, congratulations, you got your funding. And we're now just going through the very first training sessions. And there's about 30 people in my supply chain now that will get that essential life skill of being able to read and write. And it'll help keep them safe, it'll help them be more productive on the workplace, but it also means they can go home and read a story to their kids, which is a great result. So once we know what skills we need and the quantity, we can actually say, well, let's establish some pre-employment training for this one, that one, and we as industry can define the standard. And then the tertiary education sector can go and produce. We can also analyse the talent, the education pathways to get to our door. So at the moment, we do a really poor job of engaging with the education sector, and they have to guess, students have to guess, how do I get that job? What qualifications do I need? So we want to try and provide that clarity so that they can get to our doorstep with the right skills, at the right time, so there's a job waiting for them. And then we put it into action. We're now, as a partnership, going into schools, early secondary school, high school areas, to raise awareness of the construction sector. Tell them about the cool jobs that we've got. You're not just the guy with the pipes on his arms that we had in the photo before, or the guys playing noughts and crossing. Late high school, we're starting to give them the opportunity to sample careers. Come in for a gateway program or a summer placement and see whether you actually want a career in the construction sector. And the goal is just to increase the awareness and interest, get more people joining us so that we can combat that 30% decline. After that, it's into pre-employment training, getting people prepared for a career, getting them skills so that when they join, they're workforce ready. At the moment, we're running quite a high-risk model where we have to take green people, employ them on the hope that they're going to be good, and then train them on the job where mistakes are really expensive. And then once they've joined us, it's the onboarding process, the continual development, learning on the job, and hopefully eventually their succession into more senior roles. And you can kind of see the education sector involvement tails off over time and the industry's involvement ramps up over time. So I'm gonna stop that because I've nearly finished all the Tyler's time, and I'm gonna hand over to him very quickly. Thank you.